I never thought a moment of sadness would turn into something that would haunt me for years. That night, I was just a broken-hearted teenager, sitting in the living room with my head buried in my hands. My girlfriend had just dumped me over a message, and everything inside me felt shattered. I didn't know what to do or who to talk to. It was late, and the house was quiet, except for the low hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of my own breathing. I didn't even hear my mother walk in until she softly said my name. She sat beside me, her voice calm and warm like it had always been. She placed her hand gently on my back and asked what had happened. I couldn't hold it in, I broke down completely. All my bottled-up pain just came pouring out. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't even flinch. She just let me cry. And then, without a word, she pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug only a mother can give. It felt safe. Familiar. Comforting. But then, something changed. At first, I thought it was just in my head. Maybe I was imagining it. Her hand lingered too long, moved in a way that didn't feel like it used to. The room suddenly felt smaller, the silence heavier. My heartbeat quickened, but not from grief anymore, from confusion. I wanted to pull away, to ask her what was going on, but I couldn't. I sat there, frozen, torn between my mind and my emotions, trying to convince myself that it was just her way of showing comfort. But deep down, something didn't feel normal. She wiped my tears with her fingers and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't the usual motherly concern. There was something else in her eyes, something that made me uncomfortable. I tried to shift the mood, said I'd be fine, that I just needed some sleep. But she didn't move. She just kept looking at me. I remember the way her hand moved to my arm, slowly, deliberately. That's when I realized, this wasn't the kind of comfort I was used to. It felt strange. Too close. Too personal. I know how all this sounds. I know how messed up it is to even say it out loud. But what happened that night left questions in my mind I still can't answer. Was it just me overthinking things during a vulnerable moment? Or was there something more beneath the surface of that strange silence? This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about emotional confusion, blurred boundaries, and the pain of not knowing what's real. It's about a son trying to understand a moment that should have brought him peace, but instead left him with shadows. And what happened after that moment, well, that's where everything truly started to unravel. After that night, nothing felt the same. I tried to go back to normal, to pretend like it was just a bad dream or a moment of confusion that didn't mean anything. But the memory kept coming back, at random times, like when I'd sit at the dinner table, or when she'd pass by me in the hallway. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't watching, how her touches had become a little more frequent, a little longer than necessary. It made my chest tighten. But I kept telling myself, she's my mother. Stop overthinking. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Who could I even talk to? I didn't have many close friends, and definitely not the kind you open up to about something like this. My dad worked out of town most of the week and barely spoke when he was home. Our house had always been quiet, but now it felt like I was walking on eggshells. I avoided being alone with her, even if it meant staying longer at school or just walking around the block until it got dark. But she noticed. One evening, she asked me if something was wrong, if I was angry at her. I lied. I said I was just going through a rough patch. She smiled softly and said, "You know I'm always here for you, no matter what." That line stuck with me. No matter what. I didn't know what she meant by that. Was it just a normal thing a mother says, or did it mean more? My thoughts were all tangled up. I couldn't even trust myself anymore. I started doubting everything. Every past moment. Every hug. Every late-night talk we used to have. Was I just now seeing something that had always been there? Or was I imagining it all because of that one vulnerable night? I became quiet at home. I barely spoke unless I had to. I noticed how she'd sometimes glance at me from across the room, like she wanted to say something but held back. The silence between us was growing louder. I kept trying to replay that night in my mind, searching for signs, for proof that I had misunderstood. But something inside me whispered that I hadn't. Something about that night had changed our relationship in a way I couldn't explain, and whatever it was, I wasn't sure I was ready to face it yet. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew even though we lived under the same roof. I'd come home from school and go straight to my room. I stopped eating dinner at the table. I avoided eye contact. But she still tried, bringing me snacks, checking if I'd eaten, asking about school. On the outside, it might have looked like a caring mother worried for her son. But deep inside, I couldn't shake the uneasiness that had taken root since that night. I began questioning my own memories. Was I just letting one strange moment cloud years of trust? I even found myself digging into old photos, videos, anything to remind myself of who we used to be. But even those things started feeling different, like my mind was playing tricks on me. Sometimes I'd catch her standing outside my room for a few seconds before knocking. Sometimes her hugs still lingered, and I'd pull away quicker than before, pretending I had something to do. Her smile would falter, just for a second. But she never said anything. Meanwhile, things with my dad were cold, as usual. He'd come home late on Fridays, eat dinner quietly, and fall asleep on the couch watching TV. They barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it was short and emotionless. I started wondering how long it had been like that. Had I missed something all these years? Was their marriage already broken? And was that night just one piece of a bigger story I didn't understand? At school, I kept up a normal face, but inside, I was slipping. My grades dropped. I zoned out in class. A teacher even pulled me aside once, asking if everything was okay at home. I lied again. I said I was just tired. But the truth was, I didn't even know how to explain what I was feeling. One night, while looking for a charger in the drawer by her bedside, I found an old photo tucked inside a book. It was her with a man who wasn't my dad. They looked close. Too close. On the back, it said New York, 2004. I was born in 2005. My stomach dropped. Questions came rushing in. Who was he? Why was this hidden? And was this the real reason things always felt distant between my parents? That night, I didn't sleep. The weight of everything was getting heavier, and the silence between me and my mother, it was starting to feel dangerous. After finding that photo, everything shifted in my mind. It felt like I had stumbled on a secret I wasn't supposed to know. My mother, the woman who had always seemed so grounded, so careful, had another life hidden in the corners of old books. I didn't ask her about it, not right away. I wanted to be sure before opening that door. But the more I watched her, the more things started to make sense in a strange and uncomfortable way. The way she acted when Dad was around was different, stiff, distant, like she was constantly putting on a show. But with me, especially when we were alone, her energy changed. Softer, but heavier. It was like she wanted to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. Or maybe, something that never should have been. I started digging more. I waited until she was out one day and looked through some of the drawers in the study room. That's when I found a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it was in her handwriting. And as I read through it, my hands started shaking. She wrote about regret, about choices she wished she could undo, about someone she had loved before marrying my father. The words "if only things were different" kept showing up. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew enough to realize something wasn't right. There was a connection between her past, her unhappiness, and the moment we shared that night that I couldn't erase from my mind. One night, while my father was asleep on the couch, I walked into the kitchen to get some water. She was there, sitting in the dark, like she had been waiting. When she saw me, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a quiet, sad one. She patted the chair next to her. I hesitated but sat down. The room felt heavy with everything unspoken. She didn't say much at first, just asked how I was holding up. I nodded. Then she placed her hand on mine. That same slow, familiar touch. My heart started racing. I looked at her, really looked, and in her eyes, I saw something I couldn't name. Sadness? Guilt? Longing? She leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. You know, I never stopped loving him. I didn't even have to ask who. She wasn't talking about Dad. And that's when I realized, whatever was broken inside her, it had started long before me. But somehow, I was now a part of it. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. I never stopped loving him. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful, like she was finally letting go of a weight she had carried for years. But to me, it felt like she was handing that weight over. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My thoughts were spinning. All this time, there had been another man, someone she loved before marrying my father, someone she still thought about even now. But why was she telling me this? Why now? I pulled my hand away slowly, trying not to show how much my heart was pounding. She noticed. Her eyes softened. You're just like him, she said, barely audible. That stopped me cold. I blinked. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already feared the answer. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she got up, walked to a drawer, and pulled out an envelope. It was old, worn out, like it had been opened and closed 100 times. She placed it in front of me without a word. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 2 photographs, one of her and the same man from before, and the other, of me as a baby. Only this time, the man was holding me in his arms. My world tilted. I felt my chest tighten, and everything inside me sank like a stone. That's him, she said, her voice trembling now. His name was Marcus. He was the love of my life. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. My mouth went dry. So, he's my real father? I finally asked. She nodded. Your dad, Michael, he knew. He married me anyway. He raised you like his own. My stomach turned. The man I had called Dad all my life wasn't even my biological father. And now, the strange connection I had started to feel with my mother, the confusion, the blurred lines, it started making even less sense, and more sense, all at once. That one truth shattered everything I thought I knew. It didn't excuse what had happened between us, but it added a layer I hadn't expected. I wasn't just dealing with emotional confusion anymore, I was part of a hidden story, a lie that had stretched across my entire life. The tension in the house made more sense now. The coldness between my parents, the quiet dinners, the looks they exchanged but never explained. I was the unspoken piece of their broken puzzle. I stood up without saying another word and went straight to my room. My head felt like it was on fire. Was I even angry at the right person anymore? Or was I just caught in a mess that started before I was even born? I laid on my bed, eyes wide open in the dark, trying to process it all. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard my dad's voice from the hallway. He had heard everything. His voice was low, but sharp. So it's true? I froze. My dad, Michael, stood just outside my room, his eyes dark with something I had never seen before. Not anger. Not sadness. It was something deeper. A quiet kind of pain that cut right through me. I couldn't say a word. He looked at me, then past me, like he was trying to see the years that had slipped by without answers. I always knew, he whispered. But I stayed, because I loved you. I followed him as he walked down the hall toward the kitchen where she was still standing. My mother turned, her face pale. For the first time, she didn't try to speak. She just stood there, like she already knew this was coming. The three of us stood in silence for what felt like forever, with only the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us. Dad finally spoke, his voice cracking. "You should have told him the truth before it got this far." She looked down. "I didn't know how," she said quietly. "I thought I could protect him. But I was wrong." He looked at me then, not with blame, but with something close to forgiveness. "You deserved better than all of this." We all did. It should have been the end of the storm. But it wasn't. As he turned to leave, my mother suddenly stepped forward, holding the envelope with the photos. "There's more," she said, her voice shaking. My heart sank. I thought we had uncovered everything. But her hands were trembling as she handed him the same photos I had seen. He looked at them, confused at first, then something changed in his face. His eyes went wide. "Where did you get this?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "It was sent to me a few weeks ago. From someone named Angela." My dad's face turned pale. "Angela's my sister," he muttered. "But she died 10 years ago." Everything stopped. My mother pulled out another small note that had come with the envelope. It wasn't signed. Just a sentence in messy handwriting: "He deserves to know the truth. It's not what you think." My father sat down slowly, clutching the photo of Marcus holding me. This isn't Marcus," he said. "This is my old friend. He lived in New York for a while before he vanished." My stomach turned again. "What are you saying?" I asked. He looked at both of us. "There's a chance. Marcus might be my brother." It felt like the floor dropped from beneath me. In one night, everything had changed. The man who might have been my biological father could have also been my dad's blood. Which meant I wasn't just born from infidelity. I was born into something much deeper, a lie wrapped in secrets no one dared to face. And somehow, in the silence that followed, I realized this story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. We sat there in stunned silence, the truth hanging in the air like a fog that refused to clear. My father stared at the photo again, then looked at me with eyes full of things I didn't yet understand: fear, love, confusion, maybe even guilt. My mother leaned against the counter, her arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together. The room, once filled with so much unspoken tension, now felt different. Like the worst of the storm had passed, but the wreckage still needed to be sorted through. The next few days were quiet, almost eerily so. No yelling, no confrontations. Just three people moving through a house filled with truths none of us were ready for. My dad pulled out old documents and photos, trying to confirm the connection between Marcus and his family. After a week of calls and digging, he found what he was looking for. Marcus and my dad had the same last name on a childhood certificate. Half-brothers. Lost touch after a family fallout. My mother had no idea. She had met Marcus while she was on a work trip, before she ever knew my father. It didn't make what happened right. But it did change the story. I wasn't born out of betrayal with a stranger. I was born out of something complicated. Something broken but still real. And as strange as it was to admit, in a way, I still came from love. Messy love. Unplanned love. But not something evil. I had a long conversation with my dad one night. He sat next to me on the porch, sipping tea like he always did on Sundays. "You're my son," he said, staring straight ahead. "That's all I've ever known. That's all that matters." I nodded, finally letting those words sink in. He hadn't left. He hadn't treated me differently. He chose to stay, even after knowing the truth. That meant more than I could say. My mother started therapy. Not just for her past, but for herself. She apologized, not in a dramatic way, but in the small, quiet moments that felt real. We didn't go back to how things were. But maybe that was for the best. Maybe we were finally building something honest, even if it was fragile. As for me, I began writing everything down. Not to post online. Not to turn into a book. Just for myself. Because when your whole identity feels like it's been turned upside down, putting things into words helps you make sense of it. Sometimes healing doesn't come from answers. Sometimes it comes from facing the questions and still choosing to move forward. I don't know what the future holds for my family. But I do know this: I'm not defined by how I got here. I'm defined by what I do next. Infidelity, hidden paternity, family secrets, they tore through the foundation I once believed was solid. But in the end, they also made space for something new. Something painfully honest. Something human. And maybe that's where the real story begins. 59.